Welcome back to the show. I am so excited and honored to have Gary Richley on today. I've known Gary for many, many years, perhaps since I was even in high school lifting weights at Lifetime Fitness in Minnesota. And he's been a friend and a client over the years, most recently the president of Fast Test, and then spent a number of years, about a decade, as president of Colder Products Company. Uh, Welcome to the show, Gary. Thanks so much, and we're excited to have you. And maybe out of the chute, just share a little bit about your background, your origin story, and just kind of introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kip, for inviting me. I really appreciate this, a chance to talk about human capital, which is such a great topic. A little bit about myself. I'm some 50 plus years in the business world. I worked for four different Fortune 500 companies, including Cummins Engine Company, a name that a lot of people recognize, and then Dover Corporation, an $8 billion corporation out of Chicago, most recently. And I've been president of three small and medium-sized companies, two of which you mentioned, CPC and Fast Test. They were founded by Mike Lyon. I've worked with Mike Lyon since 1998. So quite a run with the Lyon family now. Matt Lyon, Mike's son, has taken over as chairman of the board, and I remain on the board of directors. So a great run. I've experienced quite a bit, and I've had some amazing mentors, blessed in my career to have worked for some great leaders.
No, that's fantastic. Great. Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on here, and before we kicked off the show, your kind of theme was that human capital is our biggest investment in business. Maybe elaborate or talk a little bit on that.
Yes. Well, and I guess I'd ask the question to the audience, is human capital your biggest investment? And for most companies, I think the payroll and related expenses is one of the largest lines on the P&L. So as I think we all know, people make the difference. In fact, I think that's the tagline for a couple of companies: our people make the difference, right? And to get an above average ROI, we need to get the right people. And then we need to invest in them, nurture, continue to train and invest in people. And in turn, they not only contribute to the business, but they contribute to the economy, and they contribute to society. So by doing the right things, it is beneficial not only to our company, but to the world in general. So I really believe this whole thing about what business are we in? We're in the people business.
Uh-huh. Oh, very good. We hear a lot about investing in people. So maybe elaborate, like, what is investing in people? What does that mean to you? Or maybe provide an example of just kind of how that philosophy is played out in the businesses that you've run.
Sure. Well, always investing in training and education. And there's some low cost ways of doing that. And then there's some high cost ways of doing it. In fact, you can bring in we've brought in outside consultants. We've joined over the years, and Minnesota has a great manufacturers alliance. And so quite often you have companies your own size or larger or smaller that are also participating in something like manufacturers alliance. Sometimes it's tailored. I've invested in several people's getting their master's degree. And funny story about that, we are in the people business, and I've invested in several people's master's degree. We sign a contract. You sign a contract with them to make sure that they understand they're making a commitment. And of course, a couple of them over the years have resigned after they got their MBA.
Huh. Interesting.
And every once in a while, there's a little sidebar comment about, gosh, we paid all that money and then the person left. In the case where they fulfilled their contract, that's just fine. And in the case that they didn't, one individual went to Carlson School of Business, a great school here at the University of Minnesota, got about 2/3 of the way through, and the company he had worked for in the past hired him back.
Huh.
And they gladly wrote us a check for what we because they could see that it was a good investment in the person. So I always felt like, gosh, these great companies around us are investing in MBAs. And so I paid for somebody's MBA, but 3M or Medtronic or somebody else paid for an MBA, and we traded, you know.
Uh,
So another thing though I wanted to get back to about the competitive advantage we get by investing in our people. And so one of the things I've done as part of education and training is always shared the P&L. And with a large group of people, go through the P&L every month. And sometimes the board of directors, the founder of the company would be concerned that we're sharing too much information, that people wouldn't understand it. For example, what's your gross margin dollars? And that's a big number. And
uh-huh.
some people might accidentally think that's how much the company is making.
Yeah.
And so there was this kind of fear about sharing and educating. And what I have found is the more you make disciples out of people, the more you share.
Mm.
These are the levers. These are the levers that make our business profitable and grow. The more you share that, the more that becomes part of the culture. And then you have other people explaining why we have to do this in this way and why it pays benefits to the company. So it's a bit of a risk that you take that you share too much, but being transparent, I have found pays dividends in the end. So I'm willing to take that risk, even if the chairman of the board has concerns.
Oh,
So,
that's fabulous. I think, yeah, people like to, like you said, get on board, become disciples of the business, and feel like they're the more open, the more transparent, the more they're bought in, and it
mhm.
just makes for everybody wants. I mean, we talk about transparency all the time, but to see it in action and then to hear have your leadership talk about it and then actually do it, I think that even makes people at every rung of the ladder feel more empowered.
Yes, yes, it's
Yeah,
being open and transparent, and that's investing in human capital, making them more knowledgeable about what are the levers in the business that help us to grow faster.
yeah, um, yeah. That's great. I mean, that's great leadership. How about maybe talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy? How has maybe your personal definition of leadership evolved over the years as you've gotten further and further in business?
Well, yeah, I'd say my philosophy is that we are in the people business, and yeah, we might make connectors, we might make engines, but it's the people that make that happen. And I think I started to learn that right away as I got into a leadership position. And I'll never forget when I was at Cummins, and I reported to the vice president of worldwide operations, and he was just a driver. And I was running the aftermarket part of it. So, aftermarket parts, if you're familiar with that part of a business, that's where you make money. And a
Okay.
lot of times people will say, do you know what it cost me for these service parts? And it's a lot. So one day we were doing a P&L review, a monthly review, and he said to me, well, how much income do you think you can make if you optimize it, if you really did everything perfectly? And being kind of young and naive, I looked at the P&L and I worked on it for 6 months probably, getting ready for the next year's plan. And I said, I think we can make 50% income as a percent of sales. And yeah. And he said, good, that's your plan. How do you get to 50% long range plan? How do you get to 50% income as a percent of sales? And I went back and told my team this is what I was committing to. And they were taken aback. It was like, oh, good luck with that one. But you know what? By involving everybody on the team, we did get there. I think it took us 4 to 5 years. Um, but it was very simple. You just need 60% gross margin and less than 10% SG&A, and you're there.
Huh.
So Every day we worked on what can we adjust the price on to get above 60% average gross margin, and what can we do to take cost out of the business, grow the top line, and not spend too much on SG&A on the people side, leverage the people we have, and we got there. And then I got a promotion and left the parts business. So my philosophy has always been leverage the talent that you have around you, and I was surrounded with some really talented people, and I had a leader, a mentor that was very challenging, very tough, the toughest boss I think I ever had.
Wow. How about, and this is, you kind of gave an example, but maybe another, just an example of an innovative approach you've taken in leadership or management that's had a significant impact on the
Sure,
business.
sure. Well, with Colder Products Company, when I started there, we were just 25 million, less than 25 million in sales. And when I left over, we were, gosh, 150 on our way to 300 million. And that was all about product innovation. So understanding that our model, now I started out in engineering, so I really loved the innovation side of the business. So we would talk every year about adding sales, marketing, and engineering, not necessarily in that order. You might say engineering, marketing, and sales one year, and the next year, change the mix a little bit. But it was all about the innovation model. And so putting a culture together that had the right kind of equipment, the right kind of labs, the right kind of travel budgets so we could get out of the building and go see the customer. The real innovation doesn't happen inside of our labs. The real innovation happens when you start talking to the customer and they say, I need to have a product that does this. And they don't necessarily know how to get there, but they know they have a need. And you only find that by getting out of the building, getting out of the office, getting out of the country, going around the world and go see. Which is, by the way, a Gemba walk means to go see. And I would always coach our people, you have to go see in order to understand what the future needs are.
Oh, that's great. And I know we talked a little bit about that one before, but maybe expound on that a little bit about your philosophy of get out of the office, get out of the building, get out of the country. I know you've done that a lot.
Yeah, no, that's always been my philosophy. When Delta came out with the Diamond program, the first year they came out with it, I was a Delta Diamond member. I flew around the world many times. I would always get a hold of the different salespeople and say, I'm coming to your territory. What are your biggest problems when I'm there? And what are your biggest opportunities? And so I would start by saying, what are your biggest problems? Because I wanted to take that off the table. I didn't want them thinking through the whole visit that they got to put this problem on the table because it's festering, it's causing problems from in the field. So what are your biggest problems? What are your biggest opportunities? And let's go see them and have a great week in the field or in the country. Sometimes it was, France or China or Korea. But get out of the building and then see the biggest opportunities. Walk a mile in their shoes. If you do that with your salespeople, they know they can trust you. They know they can, go to you if we need the resources. And so, getting out of the building and show the people that the company cares.
Yeah. Any particular trips that come to mind where, I don't know, you were shocked with the impact you were able to make on that visit, or just a revelation that happened on the trip, business wise, or with the sales team?
Great question. Great question. One of the things that I did learn, and we've had great successes in Europe, great successes in Asia. I've seen tremendous change in Asia, starting with Japan. I go back to when today, what is the yen dollar? About 140 or something like that, yen to the dollar. I remember when it got to 80 cents to the dollar, 80 yen to the dollar. I remember when the yen got so strong because of the investment that Japan made in education and training and human capital. And following that, if you, I happen to have lived through that, Korea and China did the same thing. They saw what Japan did, that little island, and both China and Korea did the same thing. So I saw in my lifetime this massive change in the world. And I've opened 3 plants in China. I opened only one in Germany, one in Europe, but 3 in China. And to see the change that has come in the world by investing in education, great colleges in these Asian countries,
Uh-huh.
they followed the US. They followed us and said, if we do this, we will be able to have an economy that rivals the US economy. And now you're seeing that, you know. It's actually daunting, isn't it? It's kind of
It is.
scary.
Yes, it is.
But I think you have to embrace it. And the next, hopefully, will be Mexico. Hopefully, they'll get that kind of investment there because I really see Mexico as being a great partner.
Yeah, absolutely. How about other than we investing in education in these countries, what are some other strategies you find most effective in identifying, capitalizing on, like, high growth opportunities, whether it's abroad or here in the US?
Yeah. Well, for our business, we needed to make sure we had the innovative design engineers. So that's a real challenge as you go into a new part of the world is hiring the right kind of talent and then transferring knowledge. Um, because each country will have their own unique standards and their own unique challenges. And quite often you'll say, we want you to do it the same way we do it in the US. And of course, then you'll find out that there's a European standard, that there's
Uh-huh.
a China standard, that there's a Japanese standard. And so hiring that talent in that country first, you got to get the engineers and the salespeople. And for us, it was always technical salespeople. You need people that speak the language. That doesn't just mean speaking Mandarin. It means speaking, how do you manufacture electric vehicles in China?
Uh-huh.
Speak that language. And so we were the current business, we're big into vehicle systems, and the current challenge is scaling up around the world with electric vehicles. And Tesla is leading our business around the world right now. So we have a philosophy of getting the big customers and then following them around the world. So if Tesla was to say you need to have a plant now in Europe, for example, in Germany, we would follow that lead and start with some engineers and then scale up. What we don't do is invest in machining. There's enough machine tools in the world. So we invest in sourcing from the great machine shops in the world and then putting in our own engineers to engineer a better solution for the customer.
Oh,
So,
that's very good. How about, I don't know, just measuring the broader economic impact of the economies around the world, as far as your investment decisions business wise?
well, that's a really great question. We have been reluctant to invest more recently in Europe because the opportunities have been emerging in other parts of the world. And we find that wherever the investment is in new plants, that's where our attention goes. So we sell a lot in the current business to Train and Carrier and Daikin in the HVAC markets. And in the last 10 years, they've really moved hard to into Mexico.
Okay.
And so we've added sales talent in Mexico. And the next step we've talked about is, will we add a assembly plant in Mexico to be close to the customer? So following the customer around the world is so important to our global strategy. It isn't go and build a plant and they will come. It is follow the customer around the world. And all the big players tend to have an Asian hub. They tend to have a European hub, a US and America's hub. And so we tend to follow them, get to know the people in the organization, and then get referrals for example, to Tesla in China or Germany.
Oh, very good. I mean, you've touched a few times on just attracting the right people. How about discussing a little about your approach for attracting and retaining like the high performance leaders or salespeople or specialists within the businesses?
Well, when we talk about people, it's something I like to say, and very simply, it's okay to be different.
Hmm.
And I say to people on occasion in the right environment, we're a can of mixed nuts. We really are. And it takes all kinds of talent to make a great company and take a great company and make it even better. Um, I like to say I'm just a peanut, you know. And you can be a filbert, you can be a walnut. It's okay to be different. And also being respectful of different people's talents and diverse skill sets. Gosh, we hired during COVID, we hired a custodian. We had never had a full time. We'd always had a part time. They'd come in 2 days a week and kind of clean the place. And we hired this man that he just leans into it. Now his skill set is relatively. We tried to invest more in him and realized, gosh, this is really what he was made for, you know. But as a result, when you walk into the lunchroom or the conference room, or it's always clean. And then before that, we had a problem with newspapers in the lunchroom and people not cleaning up after themselves. And so that person, when we hired him, everybody appreciated during COVID that we had that person there, that commitment. So whether it's a PhD electrical engineer
Huh.
or somebody in the customer support that speaks Spanish for our Spanish speaking uh, uh, companies, they're all valued. And it's okay to be different and come in all different shapes and sizes and colors. And it's okay to be different. And our challenge is how do we help them grow and prepare, you know, to be maybe in a different position because some people aspire to maybe travel globally, or some people aspire to move from sales to finance, or the opposite, from finance to from engineering into sales,
Uh-huh.
and you want to embrace that.
Oh, very good. I mean, obviously from our conversation, I can tell that culture, core values is really important to you as a leader. Maybe speak a little bit to the type of cultures you've tried to foster in the different organizations you've been a part of.
Well, it is important to have those values and then also the goals that go with it. So we would always put in a business operating system and involve the leadership and then at least one or two levels below that in a monthly business operating system review. Everybody would have their goals and would be measured on uh, key performance indicators. Once a month, we would share them and say, are we red, yellow, or green? Are we
Huh?
winning? Are we learning? And it's okay to make mistakes. Um, and the key is to always be profitably growing. And I like to say to people, profitable growth covers a lot of sins.
Uh-huh.
So it's okay to make a mistake, and we'll learn from the mistake. And if we're growing and we're profitable, and I learned that from that challenge I had of how do you get to 50% income as a percent of sales. Now, ever since that, whenever I challenge the team to aim higher, and they sounded like it was daunting to them, I could go back and say, well, maybe there's room for us to make a little more on this product price. Maybe there's a little bit of room for us to grow the top line and not add, you know, as many, you name it, accountants,
Uh-huh.
not to pick on finance, but and show people that you know what is possible. And I've run businesses that made 30% income as a percent of sales and 10% income as a percent of sales. And I'll tell you what's more fun is making more instead of being on the edge. So that's back to the teaching people about the P&L and the leverage you get.
Oh, very good. How about kind of turn a little bit to like capitalism, free markets? In what way have like embracing the free market system, capitalism that we have here in the US and other markets around the country, and what in what way have has, free markets benefited the business models you've been a part of?
Um, it's been everything. I'll just tell you, traveling the world these last 25 years has been a real eye opener. And I'm going to make a recommendation of a possible book to read,
For
and
sure.
it's called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. He's a Swedish person, and he goes around the world and describes how the world has gotten better, and he shows the facts. He wrote it with his son and his daughter-in-law, and it's very enlightening, and it makes you feel really good about what's happened in the last 25 years. Back to what I said about the education, the countries that have invested in education have come out so much better. And I saw it. I saw it happen around the world. I saw this global expansion. Yeah, sometimes it means you've got a new competitor.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes that means you really have to figure out how to be more competitive, and you do. But the result is it's a bigger world than it was, and the opportunities are bigger than they were. And the companies that embrace it and follow the business around the world are the companies that will do better. And the companies that try to maybe tighten things up and just not grow and just say we'll make a little money on business, the $20 million we have in sales, they're going to find themselves in a tough spot because they're not going to be very global in their thinking. So I was very fortunate to have been out in the world when the world was expanding so fast. And there's always a place for expansion. That's why today I'm a little bit high on Mexico as part of our long range plan.
Uh-huh.
But I think Central South America, Brazil, of course. Brazil offers huge opportunity, but you have to be in producing in Brazil to really make it happen because their tariffs are put them in a position where you need to have a strategy of how do I grow inside of Brazil. So,
Very good. How about like outside of your direct business activities, any ways that you've like advocated for capitalism or free markets? I mean, obviously study and reading books and other things, but any other just in conversations or ways you've just advocated for capitalism and free markets?
well, of course, I do that wherever I go, and what I've noticed is when you have those conversations. Let's take China for example, because I've opened 3 plants in China and have worked with some brilliant people from China. In fact, our current general manager in Shenzhen is just a brilliant strategist and got his master's degree at uh, Beijing University, a very prestigious, I believe, school. From what I know, little I know, and they all want to understand how American capitalism works. And every day, whether it's in Korea or in China or in Mexico, what you see is people wanting to operate the way we operate. Now in Beijing, I was just there the last time was in December last year. Uh, 6 million cars in Beijing. Well, when I first started going there in the early 2000s, it was bikes and a few trucks. I mean, they always had traffic problems. But now they got a new problem is 6 million people driving cars in Beijing.
Wow.
They have to pay a lot for a license there. So, and now the other thing about it is quite interesting to me is they make the license plates for electric vehicles are green. So it's like an advertisement when you're in
Interesting.
Beijing. You see all these green license plates and you go, wow, they've got a lot of electric vehicles. I don't think they necessarily, well, they did. It was a visible indicator that this is an EV. The point being, they all want to be like us. And that creates problems for them because they have these cities like Beijing, which have 20 million people. And then they have a problem with people that do gain some wealth and they want to own a car. So,
That's very interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
especially I mean, just hearing all these nations around the world that want to be like us, but yet it seems there's such an assault on free markets and capitalism in America, and especially in like higher education, what our kids are learning. Um,
yeah.
that's stark contrast. How about, and this kind of plays off that, just common misconceptions about capitalism or free markets that you've encountered and how maybe how
Well,
you've addressed those.
yeah, I think what I try to keep an open mind because these are our partners over there. So Cummins Engine Company has 6 plants in China. So to say I'm not going to be open-minded about China doesn't really make sense because if you go to call on uh, Tesla or Cummins or General Motors is in China, Ford's in China. If you go to call on them, the first thing they say to you is, "We're in China. Why aren't you?" And if you're not getting vertical integration, if you're not getting close to your customer, you will not have the business. So it's not really so much about practicing capitalism as it is good business sense to go to where your customer is, whether it's in Germany or in Brazil or in Mexico. Follow your customer around the world and you will do well. Now, does that mean we're not going to have issues with China and their current philosophies? I personally, the one topic I stay away from is politics.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes you get out there and the president of a distributorship wants to ask you about politics. And I say, you know what, that's the one subject I stay away from because I can't
Uh-huh.
affect,
Uh-huh.
I can affect business, but I can't affect the politics. So
Yeah.
we adjust to it. We adjust to
Uh-huh.
it.
How about any just currently like future trends, opportunities that as you look at the world that excite you the most? I know we talked a little bit about supercomputing before we started here, but
Yeah.
any things that really excite you?
Yeah. Well, that does for sure. I mean, artificial intelligence and quantum computing, while those aren't things that my business will jump right into, we will be affected by the rapid growth that happens with supercomputers and with artificial intelligence, and it is going to change the world. Now, right now, with the cooling of computers, liquid cooling of computers, it opens opportunities to companies like us. So our good customers are providing cooling systems to cool these massive supercomputers. As a result, we have to understand what are their needs. So anytime there's business growth, anytime there's economic growth, there's opportunity. And even though we're a mechanical, let's say in our case, a mechanical component, sometimes it's mechanical slash electric. There's opportunity. And if
Yeah.
you stay close to your customers, they'll tell you what the opportunity is. And so Train and Carrier and Daikin and the big players, they're all having to do cooling systems for electronics cooling.
How about
That's,
like building legacy? How have you worked throughout your career to like build a lasting legacy through your business ventures?
well, I think that gets back to the whole topic of this is human
Yeah,
capital.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and that's why we needed KIP search.
Yeah.
Is over time we selectively had to add some talent to the organization so that when I got to February of this year, I retired. Having people in the succession plan is so
Mm,
important, and having not just a leadership team, but two or three people deep, so that you know what you're going to do as you grow and create opportunities. So that goes back to investing in our people, and that's always been my philosophy. Um, I have to say that everyone on my staff was my leadership team. Um, gosh, in they were smarter than I was. You take the CFO, you take the VP of engineering, you take they're all smarter than I am. I just had to collect the talent and
Uh-huh.
surround yourself with the talent. And with that, then you can have a legacy. And so when I stepped out in February 15th, and we still have calls every other week, it's so nice to catch up with
Uh-huh.
the new CEO, and every couple of weeks he'll actually ask me a few questions. I try to make it his meeting, not mine.
Uh-huh.
I feel honored that he's still asking me a couple, good questions, thoughtful questions. So having that talent pool, so that if somebody does leave, this next man up, next person up.
Yeah,
So,
no, absolutely. How about kind of looking back, what decision or actions would you say have been maybe the most pivotal in your business career?
well, um, honestly, for me, and I'll go back to my first boss. In one of the first Christmas parties we went to, my wife and I, and Charlie comes up to us, and we're talking for a couple minutes, and he says, "You know, your husband is the most humble person I know."
Huh.
And I was like, I didn't want to be known as humble. But I felt, reflecting on that, that humility in life will get you a long ways. And it's never been that because I'm the boss, you're going to do this. If I'm not getting through, I try to think about, well, what is it that I'm doing wrong in communicating? So I try to use humility, not necessarily be humble, like Charlie said, but humility will get you a long ways. And if you can ask thoughtful questions of the people, you will get the right answers. So with me, it's what you see is what you get.
Uh-huh.
WYSIWYG, if you ever, what you see is what you get. And that's the way I've approached life and business as well. Be visible. Um, the only way to get knowledge is to get out and see it for yourself, whether it's in the engineering lab, or on the manufacturing floor, or on the customer's floor, you know, or in the customer's trade show booth. Sometimes you learn a lot by being a fly on the wall at your good customer's trade show booth and see
Uh-huh.
where they're going.
Yeah. Yeah. You also, I mean, before we hopped on here, you talked about just it's okay to have fun. Maybe talk a little bit about just how you've built purposeful fun into running the business and growing and scaling and all the things
Yeah.
you do.
Yes. So quite often, as we wrap up a meeting, in fact, at my retirement get together, I did say it's okay to have fun. Being a leader is a blessing. It's a real blessing. And so then the question is, how do you share that with our employees, with their families, and with our customers? Quite often in the heat of the battle, we put on our game face and go on for way too long with that game face saying, I mean it, we got to get this done. Taking time, make it a monthly get together, have fun, coach your people, and tell them it's okay to have fun. In business, I learned many years ago, and one of my heroes is Warren Buffett.
Hmm.
Uh, Business is the game of life. And it is so much fun to be in a growth business. And it's almost unfair when you're the leader. It's like, how come I get to have all this fun watching the growth, capturing the gain, taking the P&L to the board of directors, getting approval for the long range plan? It's one of the best games in life is growing a business, and it is life. And that's why I say I look at Warren Buffett, and the guy just keeps on going, right?
He does. Absolutely.
So,
Oh,
on that note, you want to be happy, and in order to be happy, you have to invest in yourself. And I put the Gap and the Gain as a book
uh,
to possibly read. And Dan Sullivan gets into why aren't people happy, and you get into the book and in the first couple chapters, and he quotes Thomas Jefferson in there, who's penned the Declaration of Independence back in 1776. And one specific phrase that he quotes in there is from the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he says right there, he put us in a position of we're never going to be happy because we're never going to reach that goal. And so he says we all are in this position of trying to get to that perfect position of happiness. And the book, if you take the time to read it, says look back and see how far we've come, how
mm,
far you've come with your business. If you look at the things you've done in your business, even in the last 90 days, and say, we're making the right moves, we're doing the right things. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to be happy. And so I think that's something that I want to leave people with is those two things: have fun and be happy.
yeah, that's very good. Yeah, I mean, Dan Sullivan's brilliant. All of his books, and like you said, I mean, it's just entrepreneurs and leaders that are you're always striving to grow and scale and get better and better and better, and you're just in this pursuit. But his sage advice to look back and look how, I mean, still pursue, but look back and see how far you've come and celebrate that and feel good and happy about that, even while you're pursuing greater things and future goals, and then you don't get burned out when you're
Right.
right. I mean, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Such a good book.
Yeah. And I think it's contagious,
Oh, for
right?
sure. Absolutely.
And the reverse is also contagious. If we always have our game face on, if we're always saying you're not getting it, you're not good enough, you know,
Yeah.
that's wearing as well. The fail forward, fail fast. You learn from your mistakes. It's not are we winning or losing, it's are we winning or are we learning. Um, I quite often when it'll happen with an engineering on a new product, and we'll get it out in the market, and I'll say, well, this is round one. Once that customer gets their hands on it, they're probably going to find that we need to improve it, and that's okay. We're going to
Yeah.
learn from and get better.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, I mean, the other thing Dan Sullivan talks so much about is servant leadership. And I can tell, obviously, from our conversation that you are a servant leader. Maybe talk a little bit about just how servant leadership has played a role in fostering culture and success in the businesses.
Well, I feel, yes, I understand the thought, and have practiced that intuitively my whole career. I started in engineering and then was fortunate to be able to move into a sales position, and from that into a general manager's position. And as a result of the general manager's positions, I was able to touch almost all functions of the company, and get immersed in it. Um, so I feel blessed in that I've touched so many bases and gotten deep into so many subjects that with that, I think I can be a good coach for people and listen and help them make better decisions, whether it's in finance, IT, engineering, sales, marketing, of course, operations. Got my hands dirty in the plant when we've had problems and we had to work overnight or work through Thanksgiving weekend, be there on the line with the people. And you learn so much
Huh.
when you're out there, and you gain so much respect for your people. Literally, that was a story where we had to work Thanksgiving. It was the one year my wife remembers where she had to clean the turkey. And the respect I gained for our people on the
Mm.
line, how fast they could work. And I do recall at the end of my shift, my hand actually starting to cramp up from doing the same repetitive motion over and over and over. So those kind of things where you walk a mile in their shoes and you say, oh boy, we have to be careful about repetitive motion. I experienced it myself. Now, being that they were younger and more nimble, I expect that they didn't get that same fatigue I did. But it really shows you, what your people are going through and how talented they are.
Yeah. No, that's great. All right, maybe one last question, kind of maybe dialing it down to the younger people. Any advice you'd give to young or aspiring entrepreneurs, business leaders, just on keys to success in today's economic climate?
Well, I think be flexible, be willing to take on stretch assignments, work with your leadership, your boss and your boss's boss to get those stretch assignments or to get an assignment in a different area. There's nothing like understanding the business. The way to understand the business is to move around in the business. And so my recommendation is to, first of all, do a great job, go above and beyond. Sometimes to master a job, it might take 3, 4, 5 years, to be honest, to master some of these jobs that are a little more in depth, um, engineering or sales or marketing or finance or professional positions. It might take you 4 or 5 years. Be there all the way through the cycle to see what worked and to see what didn't work. And I learned much more from my failures than I did from my successes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't stick around to take it full circle all the way, from design to production to failure to design to production, if you don't stay all the way through, you don't really learn. So yes, you want to move, and on one hand, on the other hand, make sure you stick around long enough to understand the decisions you made and what the effect of those decisions were. And from that, you will get real knowledge, and then you'll be more valuable. And that's back to the investment in human capital.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And I know you wanted to share a couple books. We talked about a couple here, and we'll put it in the show notes too. But I don't know if you want to kind of share the names of
I
those books. I'm not sure
think,
if it'll let me share the screen here, but if it does, go for it. Otherwise, you can kind of hold them up and name them, but then we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, perfect.
all right. So a couple of things that came to mind as we are getting ready for this discussion today is The Gap, which we talked about, The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan, I mean, and Benjamin Hardy, Dr. Hardy.
Yeah.
Um, BE 2.0, so Beyond Entrepreneurship by Jim Collins 2.0, turning your business into a great company, enduring great company. And I mentioned earlier this really fun book called Factfulness.
Uh-huh.
Anybody that's into numbers and statistics and facts, you'll just love what he describes. And gosh, he left me at the end of, we are close, on a positive note, we are close and it's within our reach to end world poverty. It
Wow.
really is.
Huh.
And once you see the numbers, you start to get hope for it. We can do this. And then you see the things that people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are doing to help end world poverty. And you say, I think it's within reach. So it's a great read. It's a little bit lighter book. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you. No, thanks for sharing those. And thanks for being on here, being a guest today. Really appreciate it. It's always amazing to chat with you and catch up. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was great having you as a client and friend and all the things. So thank you so very much.
Thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it
All
and
right.
appreciate it.
You bet.